They didn't see the shadow moving behind them because they were too busy looking at the light. Imagine three friends standing on the edge of a dream they built together with nothing but late nights and shared promises. Two of them were looking forward, eyes fixed on a future they thought was guaranteed, while the third was already looking for the exit door. Most people think betrayal is a sudden explosion, but it is actually a slow-growing rot that starts in the silence between friends. You are watching a countdown to a moment that will change 3 lives forever. And the clock started ticking the second one of them realized that loyalty doesn't pay as well as greed. This is not a movie plot or a carefully constructed legend. This is the raw, documented reality of how a lifelong bond was dismantled from the inside out. When we talk about 3 friends, we are talking about a triangle, the strongest shape in nature, but also the easiest one to break if you just remove one side. They had shared everything, from their last dollar to their deepest secrets, never imagining that those very secrets were being weaponized against them in real time. The tragedy isn't just the loss of money or the collapse of a business. It's the realization that the person who knows your laugh best is the same person who knows exactly how to make you scream. Something shifted in the air on a Tuesday afternoon, a subtle change in tone that the others dismissed as stress. But it was actually the sound of a knife being sharpened in the dark. They thought they were building an empire, but they were actually building a cage. And the person holding the key was the one they trusted most. If you think your inner circle is unbreakable, you need to listen to what happened next, because the signs were there all along, hidden in plain sight. We are diving deep into the psychology of the inside man, the friend who smiles for the group photo while mentally cropping everyone else out of the frame. This is a journey through the mechanics of a high-stakes heist, where the vault wasn't a bank, but a friendship that had survived every storm except for the one it created itself. Every choice made from this point forward was a calculated step toward a cliff, and the most terrifying part is how long the victim kept walking even after the ground started to crumble. The betrayal you are about to witness is so methodical, so cold-blooded, that it redefines what it means to be a villain in the modern world. It starts with a simple yes to a question that should have been a no, and it ends with a silence so loud it still echoes in the lives of those left behind. They were 3, then they were 2, and eventually they were just fragments of a story that no one wanted to tell until now. Watch closely, because the person sitting right next to you might be learning more from this than you are. The setup was perfect. The stakes were life-altering, and the person who burned it all down didn't even look back to see the smoke. We are peeling back the layers of a deception that took years to build and only minutes to execute, leaving a trail of questions that may never be fully answered. The first step of the plan was so subtle that even a detective would have missed it. But looking back, it was the moment the friendship died. Loyalty is a heavy burden for someone who only values weight in gold, and our villain was tired of carrying it. The others were blinded by the light of their own success, never noticing that the shadow behind them was growing taller and darker with every passing day. This is the anatomy of a heartbreak that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the brothers we choose for ourselves. As the buildup begins, notice how the language changes, how the we becomes I, and how the laughter starts to sound a little bit like a warning. You can't protect yourself from someone who has the map to your heart, and that was the ultimate advantage in this game of human chess. The escalation didn't happen in a boardroom or a dark alley. It happened over coffee, over shared meals, and during the quiet moments where trust is supposed to be the strongest. While two friends were planning for the next 10 years, the third was planning for the next 10 minutes, and that difference in perspective is where the trap was set. It's easy to spot an enemy across a battlefield, but it's nearly impossible to spot one across a dinner table. The betrayal wasn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a masterpiece of manipulation that required every ounce of intimacy they had ever shared. As the tension rises, the small inconsistencies start to pile up like dry wood, waiting for a single spark to turn the whole world into an inferno. We aren't just talking about a lie. We are talking about a total restructuring of reality where the victim is made to feel like the villain while the real predator plays the martyr. The complexity of this scheme is what makes it so chilling, as it involved legal loopholes, digital footprints, and the most dangerous weapon of all, emotional leverage. They say keep your friends close and your enemies closer, but what do you do when they are the exact same person? This is the story of the one who stayed behind to watch the bridge burn, holding the matches and wearing a look of pure, unbothered calm. The escalation was relentless, a series of dominoes falling in a pattern that only one person could see, leading toward a conclusion that felt inevitable only after it was too late to stop. Every "I've got your back" was actually a "I've got your target," and every "don't worry about it" was an invitation to disaster. The psychological toll of realizing you've been hunted by your best friend is a weight that most people can't carry, but for our villain, it was just the cost of doing business. We are moving into the heart of the deception now, where the masks start to slip and the true faces are revealed in the harsh light of the consequences. There is a specific kind of coldness required to look someone in the eye and lie about their own future, while you are actively stealing it from them. This wasn't just a theft of property. It was a theft of time, a theft of memories, and a theft of the ability to ever trust another human being again. The impact ripples outward, affecting families, businesses, and the very foundation of the community they lived in. As we move toward the twist, remember that in a world of predators, the most dangerous ones are those who have learned how to mimic the sound of a friend. The evidence was there, buried in the fine print, and hidden in the deleted messages, but who looks for a crime in a place they call home? The transition from the setup to escalation is where the true genius of the villainy lies, as they manage to keep the peace while preparing for war. It is a masterclass in staying silent when you want to scream and smiling when you want to strike. The two remaining friends were like sailors on a ship where one man was drilling holes in the hull while singing a sea shanty to keep them distracted. It's a terrifying image, but it's the only way to describe the sheer audacity of what was happening behind the scenes. Every resource the group had was being siphoned off, not all at once, but in small, untraceable amounts that added up to a total collapse. The villain didn't want a piece of the pie. They wanted the bakery, the recipe, and the person who sold the flour out of the way. As the pressure builds, the cracks in the facade become impossible to ignore, leading to a series of confrontations that were designed to fail. The manipulation of information was so complete that the two victims began to doubt each other, which was exactly what the villain needed to finalize the kill. Divide and conquer isn't just a military strategy. It's the primary tool of the domestic traitor. By the time the climax arrives, the audience will be left wondering how anyone could be so blind, but the truth is that we are all blind to the people we love. This is a wake-up call to look at the shadows, to listen to the silence, and to realize that the most expensive thing you can ever give someone is your trust. because you can never get it back once it's been spent. The story of these three friends serves as a haunting reminder that the greatest villains don't wear capes or masks. They wear the clothes you lent them and speak with the voice of your brother. As the script unfolds, we will see the exact moment the heart of the group stopped beating and the cold, calculated aftermath that followed. This is reality, stripped of its comfort and laid bare for everyone to see. The air in the room was heavy, with the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of a betrayal that had finally surfaced. To understand the climax, you have to understand the mechanics of the slow bleed, a technique where the villain ensures the victims feel the pain of every single loss without knowing where the wound is coming from. The two friends, let's call them the builders, were still operating on the logic of collective growth, while the villain was operating on the logic of total extraction. Every morning for 6 months, the villain would arrive at the office early, not to work, but to scrub the digital trails of the previous day's diversions. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the ego of outsmarting the people who called him a brother. He watched them stress over falling margins. He watched them skip their own salaries to pay the staff, and he even sat across from them at dinner, nodding in faux sympathy as they discussed how to save the dream. This is the point where the story stops being about a business failure and starts being a study in sociopathic detachment. While the builders were looking at spreadsheets, the villain was looking at power of attorney documents and forging signatures that would effectively hand him the keys to their entire lives. The escalation reached a boiling point when a third-party audit was triggered. Not by the partners, but by a bank that noticed a pattern of irregularities that looked less like mistakes and more like a heist. The villain didn't panic. He simply redirected the blame. He planted seeds of doubt, suggesting to one builder that the other had a secret gambling problem, and telling the second builder that the first was planning to buy him out behind his back. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The tension between the two loyal friends became so thick that they stopped speaking, which was exactly the opening the villain needed to finalize the transfer of assets. He wasn't just stealing their present. He was stealing their history. He took the intellectual property they had spent a decade developing and registered it under a shell company in a jurisdiction they couldn't touch. The day the twist landed was a Tuesday, the most unremarkable day of the week. The builders walked into the office to find the locks changed and a legal notice taped to the glass. It wasn't from a competitor or the government. It was from a law firm representing a company they had never heard of, a company owned entirely by the man who had been their best man at their weddings, the godfather to their children, and the person they trusted with their lives. The shock wasn't a sudden scream. It was a long, hollow silence that felt like the world had run out of oxygen. They stood on the sidewalk, two men who had lost everything in the span of a heartbeat, watching their friend drive past them in a car they had helped him pay for, without so much as a glance in the rearview mirror. This was the moment the mask didn't just slip, it was shattered. The villain had moved into the climax of his plan, which involved a preemptive legal strike to ensure the builders were tied up in litigation for years, preventing them from ever rebuilding or coming after him. He used the very secrets they had shared during late-night venting sessions to blackmail them into silence, threatening to expose personal vulnerabilities if they dared to speak to the press or the police. The cruelty was the point. He didn't just want to be rich. He wanted them to be destroyed. He wanted to prove that their belief in loyalty was a weakness he had successfully exploited. As the legal battle began, the emotional toll started to manifest in physical ways. One of the builders suffered a stress-induced heart attack, while the other fell into a deep depression that cost him his marriage. The ripple effect of one man's greed was a tsunami that leveled everything in its path. But here is where the real story gets even darker. The villain didn't just get away with it, he flourished. He used the stolen capital to launch a new brand, positioning himself as a self-made visionary who had trimmed the dead weight of his former partners. He did interviews, he gave talks on leadership, and he wore his betrayal like a badge of honor, rebranded as tough business decisions. The reality of the situation is that justice doesn't always come in a courtroom. Sometimes, the only justice is the survival of the truth. The builders eventually stopped fighting the legal battle they couldn't afford and started the long, agonizing process of rebuilding their lives from zero. They learned that the most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who hates you, but the one who loves you for what you can give them. The resolution of this story isn't a happy ending where the money is returned and the villain goes to jail. It's a somber reflection on the fragility of human connection. It's about the scars that stay long after the bank accounts are closed. It's about the fact that even now, years later, when one of the builders sees a car that looks like his old friend's, his heart skips a beat. Not out of affection, but out of a primal, lingering fear. The villain is still out there, moving in elite circles, but he lives in a world where he can never truly trust anyone, because he knows exactly what a friend is capable of doing. He is a king in a castle built of glass and stolen bricks, waiting for the day someone just like him decides to take a look at his blueprints. This story is a warning that the inside man is always the one you never suspected. It's a call to audit your own circles, not just your finances. Because at the end of the day, a real story doesn't end with the end screen. It ends with a lesson that costs you everything you thought you knew about the world. Every detail of this betrayal was calculated, every emotion was weaponized, and every memory was turned into a trap. We are now entering the final phase of the narrative, where we examine the long-term implications of living in the wreckage of a shattered brotherhood. It is a place of ghosts and what-ifs, where the only currency left is the truth of what really happened behind those closed doors. The escalation may have stopped, but the echoes of the climax are still vibrating through the lives of everyone involved. The aftermath of this betrayal is a landscape of ghosts, where every shared memory has been retrofitted with a hidden motive. When the two loyal friends finally sat down to compare their notes, free from the villain's interference, they discovered a chilling timeline that spanned years. It wasn't just a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a career of deception. The villain had been living a double life, maintaining a facade of professional brotherhood while building an entirely separate infrastructure designed to absorb their collective hard work the moment it reached peak value. They found emails sent years prior, where the villain was already pitching his solo vision to investors using their prototypes, while simultaneously encouraging them to take out personal loans to keep the main business afloat. The true weight of a real-world betrayal is felt in the small, domestic details. It is the birthday parties where the villain sat next to their children, the weddings where he gave the most emotional toasts, and the holidays where he was treated as family. Every one of those moments was a lie. To the villain, these weren't emotional connections. They were data points and leverage. He knew that as long as he stayed close, they would never look at the fine print. He banked on the fact that decent people cannot imagine the level of cold-blooded calculation required to ruin a friend's life for a percentage of a profit margin. This is why the recovery for the victims takes so long. They aren't just mourning a business. They are mourning their own sense of reality. The final phase of this story is the most difficult to witness: the survival of the predator. In the corporate world and the social media age, the one who tells the story first and loudest often wins the public's favor. The villain used his stolen wealth to hire a public relations firm to craft a narrative of a visionary founder who outgrew his partners. He bought the silence of those who knew the truth and weaponized the legal system to keep the victims in a state of permanent financial exhaustion. He understands that in a fast-paced world, people don't have the patience for the truth. They only have time for the headline. He is the ultimate character lock in his own story, refusing to deviate from the script of the successful, self-made man, even as the foundation of his soul remains hollow. As the builders eventually stopped fighting for the money and started fighting for their peace, a strange thing happened. They realized that the villain, despite his new cars and his growing influence, was the one who was truly trapped. He lives in a world where everyone is a potential threat because he knows exactly how easy it is to destroy someone from the inside. He cannot form a real bond. He cannot have a genuine conversation, and he can never truly rest. The victims, though broken and starting from zero, regained the one thing the villain can never have again: the ability to look at themselves in the mirror without seeing a ghost. They are rebuilding their lives with a newfound clarity, understanding that while the cost of their lesson was everything they owned, the value of the truth is priceless. The story of the three friends, the two who built and the one who burned, is a haunting reminder of the fragility of our social contracts. It teaches us that the greatest threats to our peace aren't the enemies we face at the gate, but the brothers we let through the door. It is a call to be vigilant, to trust but verify, and to never let the light of your own ambition blind you to the shadow growing in the corner. If you find yourself in the ruins of a betrayal, know that the ending hasn't been written yet. You have the power to take back your narrative and prove that a life built on truth will always outlast a kingdom built on lies. The story doesn't end with a settlement or a sentence. It ends with the realization that the person who cheated you didn't just take your past. They gave you a future where you finally know exactly who you are and, more importantly, who you will never be. The path forward is long, but it is paved with integrity, and that is a road the villain will never be able to follow. The world is full of people who will promise to walk beside you just to learn where you're vulnerable. Stop running from the truth and start building a circle that can survive the light. If this story felt like a mirror, it's time to break it and see the world for what it really is before the locks change again.